Huffy Amara. It's time for the unofficial geometry and specs video. Unofficial because, as I did on my Dakari video, told you I don't have any contacts at Huffy, so I'm having to measure all this myself. And I have a fancy pointing apparatus for this video. Knockoff Race Face Chester faux carbon, what I'm pretty sure is faux carbon fiber handlebars. Or sure enough, I won't be riding on carbon fiber, whatever they are. So let's start with some measurements that we already know. The handlebars. I know these are 740 millimeters wide, 31.8 millimeter diameter. I know the stem is 70 millimeters. The head tube. I know this is a roughly 66 degree head tube angle, and I say roughly because I get between 66 and 66.3. So I'm just going to call it 66. And let's talk about that taper, at least the outside part. We'll get to the internal cup in just a minute. But the outside part of this taper, 50 millimeters at the top, 62 at the bottom. Little arm switcheroo here so I don't have it so close to the camera. So now let's talk about the fork. I already know this is 100 millimeters of travel. What about the spacing on this fork? It's 100 millimeters because it's a standard quick release. Let's go to the frame with its internal cable routing. I measured the top tube and I got 605 millimeters. Again, remember, unofficial specs, so it could be a few millimeters off here or there. Down tube, 720 millimeters. What about this shock? Eye to eye, I did not measure that in my review video, but I have now, and I get 175. And seat post diameter, we also already know that's 27.2 millimeters for the diameter. I did mention the length. That's a little bit less than 330, somewhere between 325 and 330 millimeters. Now we get to this thing, and there's an official word for this frame design. I'm just going to call it the trailing arm. But this is a little odd to measure because normally you measure the part that comes up from here and down, and that's the seat stay, and then you have the chain stay down here. Well, it's all welded together here. So what I did was I measured from the center of this pivot tube to the dropout down here. For this entire arm, I get 510 millimeters from that point to that point. If I want to treat it as a chain stay and a seat stay, measuring from here down, 440 millimeters, and then the mythical seat stay would be 435. And what about the bottom bracket that's hiding down here? That's 68 millimeters, and from the bottom of the bottom bracket to the ground, 320. Now to the final three. See, I have my fancy Alabama engineered measurement apparatus. I really do need to see what acronym that makes up. I hope it's nothing offensive. But measuring from the center of the top tube to the center of the line, from the bottom bracket center up, that's going to get me the reach. And on this bike, the reach is 467 millimeters. And the stack, that's going to be 578 millimeters. What about the standover height? I forget that a lot. People ask me about that. That's the standover height from roughly here down to the ground. I measured that and I got 815 millimeters. Let's talk about one more thing though. This suspension system, I said 175 eye to eye, but that's not how much this will squish in. I don't know exactly how much this will squish in, but I do know I can guesstimate rough rear travel. How much this rear wheel can move up and down versus the front half of the frame, and get a good idea of the suspension travel. And it's not super impressive, it's 75 millimeters. So just factor that in if you're thinking about a Huffy Amara. You're going to get about 75 millimeters of rear travel. Now it's time to unapparatus everything. I'm going to knock out the lower cup. We're going to measure that, see if this in fact can fit a tapered fork. First discovery, the cage bearings all intact and greased, arguably even better than the Dakari. Cup out, moment of truth time, the big reveal. What do we have? Look at that, 56 millimeters. That's perfect. That means this could use a ZS5640 and properly take a tapered fork. Pretty awesome. And there we go, back together, albeit with a few cables and lines not quite properly routed, but that's not going to matter because, as I mentioned in my review video, not my bike, purchased by a relative that wanted something out of the box that could ride with me on the trail. I did not talk with them about the Amara. After I got it, I was just going to assemble it, let them watch the review and make their determination, and I did just that. I let them watch the review. They called me, and I can't use the exact words, But I can paraphrase and tell you, oh heck no. No way am I spending $700 for what I just saw. So that begs the question, is there anything I would do to this bike to make it a little better? Well, yeah, obviously a cheap tapered air fork would be probably better than this. A cheap air shock, but there's still that frame flex. So if you ask if I'm going to buy an Amara and upgrade it, no. No plans on any such activity at this time. If you can give me a justification, be sure to comment with it down in the comments. I read each and every one, but this Amara, as much as I wanted this to be something, just too much disappointment. There's still some good about it. I mean, it's technically usable, but just not for me. Too many pedal strikes, frame flex, all that. So there you go. Huffy Amara unofficial geometry and specs video. Comment below with what you think. At least specs wise, on paper, how do you feel this stacked up? Thanks so much for watching KevCentral. Have a great day.